from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Happy to be here with you on Monday. You know, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were like, man, it feels like Monday, it's dragging. And I thought to myself, man, I love coming to work on Monday. It's because I've been off for 2 days. Anyway, I want you to join our late-night national town hall conversation. Give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, China is up to no good. We're going to get an update on what's going on in China straight away. There's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. There's a lot of really disturbing information, to tell you the truth. It's just, I don't know. I think disturbing is the word. Let me share some of these headlines with you that I saw today that I thought, my goodness, what is going on here? Let me see. They were in Breitbart, and they had to do with a lot of interesting things here. Anyway, when I find them, I'll get them to you. But lots of crazy stuff going on there. And I want to also start on a light note, right? The lighter note I wanted to start off on was I saw this comedian, a little comedy clip from a comedian. And there was also a comedian that was hosting the Oscars, which played yesterday. And I know very few people are interested in the Oscars like they used to be. I used to watch them. It was pretty fun. It was cool to see what was going on, you know. And the Oscar goes to, you know, it was kind of, the suspense was great. But I think people have really lost touch with a lot of what Hollywood is doing. And Hollywood's definitely lost touch with a lot of America. And I think that's been evidenced by the way films have been over the last couple of years. Some will blame COVID, and that's appropriate, I think. But you can't blame COVID for things like the Tom Cruise movie, the Top Gun movie, doing really, really well because it was a kind of patriotic movie. And other movies that are not so patriotic, not doing as well. Now, some could say, but Rich, what about Barbie? Yeah, you're right. Barbie did well. So did Oppenheimer. But apart from those two films, there weren't a ton of standout films. And again, I didn't watch the Oscars. You know, if I had a ticket, I would have gone. I'm not boycotting the Oscars, but I just didn't watch it. And my point is, we've seen this departure, and we had this big discussion on Friday with Kevin Sorbo, Hollywood actor who left Hollywood and now he's in Florida and he's happy as can be. And if you missed that, make sure you check out the interview at richvaldez.com. You can check out all of our previous interviews at richvaldez.com. But I thought, what's happened to the state of affairs in comedy, in particular late night comedy, like the guys who are on TV when we're on the air a little bit later? And I'm not a big hater, right? I think it's pretty commonplace for people to say, oh, they're not even funny anymore, these late night. I laugh at a lot of these guys. Trevor Noah makes me laugh. Jimmy Kimmel occasionally makes me laugh. Let me see, who else? Stephen Colbert almost always makes me laugh. I think he's a very funny guy. I know, a lot of people take exception to that. And they go, oh, he's not funny. He used to be funny. I don't really care for people's politics. I understand who they are. They're a bunch of liberal actors and comedians that live in Hollywood. What else do you expect from those people, right? So that's who they are. And what comes out of their mouth is what comes out of their mouth. Now, sometimes that stuff's not funny, but occasionally they do. Occasionally SNL nails it, right, when they're making fun of what's going on. Sometimes it's a little bit, you know, like in Spanish, my dad would say, se pasan, right? They go a little too far. But for the most part, I think most of the humor is funny. Anyway, so I want to start with this one. This guy is a comedian, and he does a really funny impression of Trump and of Biden. And his name is Tim Hawkins. And he does this to the tune of the Candy. Oh, this is not the one I'm talking about. This is a song. Even funnier, actually. Listen to this.
Hi, everybody. Gather round. I'm here to give you anything you like. You want free college, energy, mortgages, whatever you like. You have come to the right place. Why? I'll tell you why. Who can take your money?
Who can take your money?
With a twinkle in their eye.
A twinkle in their eye.
Take it all away and give it to some other guy. The government. The government can. And who can tax the sunrise? Who can tax the trees?
Who can tax the trees?
Well, let you run a business and collect up all the fees. The government. Oh, the government can.
The government can.
And the government can, 'cause they mix it up with lies and make it all taste good.
It all tastes good.
Government takes everything we make to pay for all of their solutions, like healthcare, climate change, pollution. Just throw away the Constitution. I wrote that. Thank you.
And again, making light of the current situation. I think that's what we have to do. At least that's how I feel. Otherwise, you pull your hair out. And I feel myself pulling my hair out all the time. Look at me. Come on. Anyway, I thought that was funny to the tune of the Candyman. And it made a lot of sense. Who can take your money? The government can. And of course they can. And we're going to talk about how the government is taking people's money when we get into our economic segment a little bit later on with a former White House economist. But before we do that, I want to share when President Trump put out a post on Truth Social about the Academy Awards. And this is funny because one of the things that I think many of Trump's critics don't like about Trump that I have always found very funny and humorous and entertaining is how he is a real critic, right? He's a culture critic. He's involved in everything, right? He's body slamming and slapping Vince McMahon in the WWE ring. He's saying you're fired in the Apprentice boardroom. He's all over. He's got a TV show. He's doing all these things, throughout the years, making money, doing his stuff. He's a real mogul by every sense of the word. And I think when he got away from a lot of that while he was president because he couldn't do it. He'd get in trouble for everything he said, but he's a funny guy. And when he put out this tweet, and I saw it, and I thought it's not a tweet, but a truth on Truth Social. And I thought it was very funny. And not too long after that, who was reading it live at the Oscars? That's right, Jimmy Kimmel, the host of the Oscars, another comedian. And I thought it was great that he paid homage that way. And he tried to put a little zinger in there as well. Listen to this.
Has there ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less than average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed up but cheap ABC talent, George Slopinopoulos. He would make everybody on stage look bigger, stronger, and more glamorous. Blah, blah, blah. Make America great again. See if you can guess which former president just posted that on Truth Social. Anyone? No? Well, thank you, President Trump. Thank you for watching. I'm surprised you're still watching. Isn't it past your jail time?
So the second time around, I didn't laugh, but the first time I thought it was funny. I really did. Forgive me. Anyway, that was the exchange there. And again, I just thought it's Trump and his 14-dimensional thinking, having the Hollywood left shout out Truth Social and read his comments on TV. It doesn't get more brilliant than that, does it? Come on. Anyway, so we're going to talk about George. He called him Slopolopoulos. We're going to call him George Stephanopoulos until I come up with something else. And George Stephanopoulos joined in on the war on women over the weekend, attacking Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who had recently disclosed that she was raped earlier in her life. And it was interesting. I think some would say that he was, following up and pushing back as a good reporter should. And others would say he was, badgering his guest who clearly said she was uncomfortable. So we'll have that audio for you and a reaction to that from somebody who knows all too much about the war on women. And we've got an action-packed show for you. So you're going to have to listen all 3 hours tonight. Get comfortable, have your coffee, kick your feet up, gather the family around the radio and let's rock and roll and do some old school talk radio like we've never done it before. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back, familia. We continue our discussion on what's going on in America at night. And listen to this headline, Breitbart News. Blood money, Chinese government documents reveal detailed plan to subvert American culture using tech and Hollywood to target American children. That's a headline today by Catherine Hamilton, over the weekend, rather. And Chinese government documents and restricted military journals show how the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is using social media like TikTok and Hollywood to target vulnerable young consumers and tear at the fabric of American culture. And that's according to Peter Schweizer's new book, Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Now, this is something I want to talk about. And who better than the author of the book, Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans, Peter Schweizer, to talk about it. Peter Schweizer, welcome back, sir.
Great to be with you, Rich. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So I love the title of the book, Blood Money, because I think it's right. It's appropriate, right? We look at Joe Biden, we say, man, this guy's got blood in his hands. I look at Xi Jinping and I think, he's right up there with Putin. Let's talk about the book that you've written, the research that you've compiled, and why you chose this as the namesake for the book.
Well, it's really indicative, I think, of some of the problems we're facing in America. China certainly didn't cause those problems, but I think what I explained in the book, and the evidence is clear, that they have certainly exacerbated those problems. Social divisions that we have, they're fanning the flames. But at the same time, we have political leaders who really don't do anything about it. I don't think it's out of ignorance. I think it's out of the desire to avoid having to confront the issue, or the fact that they are, let's say, financially entangled. The way I look at it is America is on fire. China's holding an empty can of gasoline, and our leaders are sitting there silent, watching it happen. And I think that explains a lot of the things that are going on in America. Again, China didn't cause them, but they are absolutely exacerbating them on a daily basis.
I think you're right, Peter Schweizer, and I love the analogy. We're on fire. China's holding the empty gas can. And I think that's been the case since COVID-19. And we turned a blind eye then, and we continue to turn a blind eye. What is the fear? Do you think the fear of calling China out for what they are, is it that they'll try to collect on the debt that we have with them, that they will try to cripple us with a more intense trade war? Would it be more of what they're doing, more subversion of American culture and indoctrination? What do you think the threat really is, why people don't go at China, either side of the aisle?
Well, it's a great question, Rich. I think that a lot of people in Washington don't want to do it because it complicates their job, right? People don't want the heavy lift. They prefer to go the easy path. And once you accept what China's doing in terms of, increasing violence on our streets, increasing social division, once you acknowledge that they are meddling in this way, your job becomes a whole lot more difficult in Washington. So I think that's part of the answer. I do think for a smaller group of people, and this is people on both sides of the aisle, there's the added problem that they have financial entanglements. And that this means that China has leverage over them, or that this could be deeply embarrassing if they get into a public spat with China. So they are more conflicted, and I think, less likely to want to raise the issue at all. And this involves people on both sides of the aisle. It certainly involves Joe Biden, and it also involves, for example, Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate.
Oh, for sure. We call him Mitch the Turtle McConnell. And I'm so happy that he's not going to be leader, right? But, I think those that are, Thune, the rest of them, his ilk, he's got people that he's groomed. Do you think he really steps away? Or is it like a Nancy Pelosi type of thing where, I think she's still very much in control. What say you?
Well, Rich, people like to pick their successors, and the reason they like to pick their successors oftentimes is because they like to maintain a semblance of control. I think that is certainly what Mitch McConnell is looking for. I think in terms of China, his challenges or his entanglements are somewhat unique. I don't think any of the people that he has identified as successors quite fit the bill. His family is deeply entwined financially with China to the point that if he were to say or do something that was upsetting to Beijing, calling them out on these activities, they could destroy the family business. And Mitch McConnell certainly doesn't want to see that happen. But I think in general, the position on China, a lot of the Republican leadership has been weak. China recognizes that the way that you can pressure people in Washington, D.C. is not by going at them directly, but by simply going to the business community in America that wants access to Chinese markets and say, you lobby them on our behalf. So when President Trump, for example, introduced tariffs on Chinese goods when he was president, whether one agrees with that or not, the point is what China's response is interesting. They didn't go to Washington to debate it. They went to Silicon Valley and Wall Street and said to them, you will go and lobby on our behalf, because if you don't, you will not get the same access to our market you've had. So, of course, they dutifully did lobby the administration aggressively on it.
It's interesting, right? It really is. And it goes right back to the question that you just answered for me, which was it makes their job difficult. This is why nobody fights with China, because they do have a lot of influence and they have a lot of money. And it seems like people are like, if I don't rock the boat too much, somehow, somewhere, I'll get some of this money. And things will continue to just flow nicely. And that's, I think, why they want to make nice. But meanwhile, we're staring down the barrel of endless amounts of propaganda, and they're very good at this. Just like I think the Russians and the Iranians are now becoming good at this, of this creating propaganda and to turn a culture, and we're seeing that. And you get into that a little bit with your book, and I want to know more about your thoughts on TikTok and other types of influence that they have besides Hollywood, because I think this is a vulnerable place for Americans, whereas I think there's a lot of people out there that are like, I want to start a YouTube channel. I want to become an influencer. I want to, I'm trying to gain traction on Instagram, let's say, to promote my business or whatever content I create, etc. And then they go on TikTok and they flourish very quickly. And I know a lot of people that have gone on TikTok and they didn't make it on any other social platform, and now they're making it big on TikTok and they're making money and they're building these, million plus followings. And I ask myself, is this good? I don't know if it's good. I think it's a trap. So hold on to that thought. Folks, we're coming right back with Peter Schweizer. He's president of the Government Accountability Institute, and he's author of the brand new book. You got to get a copy for yourself and a copy to give away. Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Grab it on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Again, 2 copies. One for you, one for a gift. Don't go anywhere. Coming right back with Peter Schweizer. I'm Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Welcome back, familia. All right, amigos, we're back, and we are continuing with Peter Schweizer, president of the Government Accountability Institute and the author of the brand new book, Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Make sure you grab 2 copies, one for yourself, one to give away. Now, Peter Schweizer, I know that you're talking about different types of ways that China is subverting American culture using technology and the film industry, and they're targeting American children. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, it's an all-out war on America. While we debate whether we might have a war with America, it's already here. Some of it involves the death of Americans. Certainly, you mentioned COVID. I talk in the book about how they maximize the body count for COVID by lying and deceiving to us, and people in the medical establishment like Tony Fauci essentially covered up for them. But you also have deaths that occur through fentanyl. As I show in the book, while a lot of people look at the Mexican cartels as the main culprits, they're really the junior partners. China runs most of the operation involving fentanyl. And then you have issues of violence on America's streets. In 2018, China started smuggling into the United States this device called the Glock switch, or an auto sear switch. It's highly illegal in the United States. You add it to a Glock handgun, and it will make a Glock handgun fully automatic. They were specifically marketing these to organized criminals, felons, and drug dealers in the United States. So we have a situation today where machine gun fire has returned to America's city streets. So they're doing all these things that are actually, killing Americans. But you also have their efforts to really divide us culturally. They do a lot of work online. There are hundreds of thousands, millions of social media accounts that have been established by Chinese military officers. They have large facilities where they set up accounts posing as Americans online in social media. And half of these accounts, Rich, will say America's a hopelessly racist, bigoted society. The other half of the accounts, again, posing as Americans, will say, I only like white people. They're working to try to pit us against each other. Mm-hmm. It's not to say we have these issues, sure, but they are trying to magnify them and intensify them, and they're being successful in doing so.
Oh, yeah, and I think we see that all the time. And this is one of the things that I see with I'm going to call them my friends in the conspiracy community, and I think many of us are considered conspiracy theorists at times because the things we talk about eventually come true. But there are certain things that are out there that I think are manufactured, and I believe this racial divide in our country is not as deep and profound as the media or any of the propaganda mechanisms would have you believe. I think that this is something that was once a thing and isn't a thing anymore, but we're making it a thing, a pretend thing. And you've got a few race hustlers out there, Al Sharpton and others that are out there, Joe Biden, and they're exacerbating it. And I find like it's amazing how it reminds me of, not to overstate anything, but of Goebbels and how he, his idea of if you say it often enough, it'll be perceived as truth. I feel like we're there. Yeah. No, I think that's well said. And look, the bottom line is that there are people that benefit from racial division in America. And you talked about some of the domestic actors that generate money and revenue and donations by highlighting this problem. But you also have China that profits. They have a strategy that I lay out in the book. It's called disintegration warfare. That's what they call it. And they've really adopted this under President Xi. And the strategy is straight out of, the ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu, which is the best strategy is to beat your enemies without actually fighting them. And that's really what they are intent in doing. So they want to see America divided. They want to see America violent. They want to do things they can to increase that. And then they highlight these problems in America. And racial division has always been something that they have been interested in, back in the 1960s under Mao. But now with social media, they're able to really magnify it. It's the same thing, Rich, with a lot of the protests we had in 2020 with Black Lives Matter, a lot of the Hamas demonstrations that we're seeing today. Right. The
organizers of those marches, the really hardcore organizers that put those events together and help them turn violent, are groups like FRSO and PSL. These are groups that are aligned with China. They have pledged their fealty to China and to the CCP. There is a flow of funds that occurs to these groups that's coming out of China. They talk and communicate. I quote from Chinese government reports where they're tracking the progress of these groups. And these groups, again, in 2020, you might have had people that were concerned about, race issues related to the police, and they wanted attention paid to it. These groups were going to those protests saying, no, all cops are racists. We need to abolish the police. And they started violent protests. And that's really what they're designed to do, is to push the extremes. And again, this is part of China's effort to sow social division in the United States.
And it's working. It's working like a charm.
Yeah.
Now, Peter
Yeah.
Schweizer, the cover of your book, I see Gavin Newsom and Dr. Fauci and Adam Schiff and all-out crazy AOC. And I see a bald guy. It's not me. Who's the bald guy?
So his name is Roy Singham. Roy Singham is a American billionaire who moved to China. He's a Maoist. He made his money selling a business to an investment fund run by the Chinese government. He moved to China, and he has now poured $161 million in the last couple of years to radical causes in the United States. These are like these Antifa-type groups that are causing violence on the streets. He also, this is probably the biggest surprise to me in finding in the book, is he's also one of two China-based billionaires that are among the biggest funders of the trans movement in America. This I didn't expect to happen, but Roy Singham has poured money into the radical trans movement. The other one is a guy named Joe Tsai, who's the co-founder of Alibaba, which is the big sort of equivalent of Amazon in China.
Yeah.
It's a state-connected company. Joe Tsai has poured tens of millions of dollars into the trans movement. And here's what makes me suspicious about what's going on, Rich. There's no neither one of these gentlemen is trans. They don't have family members that are trans. But here's the kicker. Neither one of them actually advocates for these positions in China itself. They're only funding and supporting these activities in the United States. Anybody who looks at this knows that the situation for the alphabet community, LGBT community, is far worse in China than it is in the United States.
Right. They don't have that issue there.
Exactly. But these gentlemen do not advocate for these positions in China. They only advocate in the United States. And I think it's one of the reasons, with the money they put behind it, that it has emerged as such a powerful issue over the last couple of years. And again, it creates and sows division and confusion in the United States, which is one of the things that the Chinese government wants to achieve.
Wow. Folks, again, we are on with the author of Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. And that's Peter Schweizer. He's president of the Government Accountability Institute. We're coming right back with him, and I want to hear about why AOC's on the cover of your book as well. She's definitely our least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, and she's making it big time with your soon-to-be New York Times bestseller. Folks, we're coming right back with Peter Schweizer.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Peter Schweizer. He's author of the brand new book, Blood Money. You got to get a copy for yourself and a copy to give away. Peter Schweizer, why is AOC, all out crazy, our least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, on the cover of your book?
Well, there's several reasons. I'll give you what I think is perhaps the most interesting, and that is that China views AOC and Bernie Sanders as, in their words, very important vehicles for advancing their agenda in the United States. Now, that may seem obvious to listeners in your program, but the fact that China writes this in black and white in its internal assessments of the United States, I think, is particularly interesting. And what they basically do, Rich, is they argue that the Communist Party USA is really nothing. I mean, it's got a few thousand members. It has no influence. But the Democrat Socialists of America, of which AOC is a member and which Bernie Sanders affiliates himself, they view as an imperfect vehicle, but a vehicle nonetheless to advance CCP causes in the United States. Mm-hmm. And it manifests itself in all kinds of different ways. For one thing, AOC does not criticize China on anything. You look at the fentanyl crisis, which has ravaged her district in the New York area. She will not call China out on it, even though China is involved in every single aspect of bringing this poison into the country. And I would argue is the senior partner, the drug cartels are the junior partner. The other aspect, I think, of it is that AOC would not criticize China for what happened with COVID and how they used COVID to manipulate the United States and to try to into imitating some of its own policies. So that's the reason, among many others, that AOC is on the cover of the book.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, I've always thought that AOC and her communist sympathizing grandpa, Bernard Sanders, that they're such a dynamic duo and they're so odd in American politics, right? They're really so far to the left. Liz Warren kind of comes in, I guess, alongside them in many ways, but there's not a ton of them that are that unabashed as they are. And I've always wondered why and what the tie is, what the connection is. And I guess China sees some value in them, Peter Schweizer.
Yes, they do. And I think that's the important point to make is that, AOC and Bernie Sanders, they position themselves as, well, we're to the left because we care about people. Now, look, we can have a discussion about the fact that it doesn't really help people, but that's their position. The problem is when it comes about that China is actually doing brutal things to people, they will not criticize China for it. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think it's because they feel this ideological fealty to them. You saw this especially during COVID. We know for a fact now, I laid out in the book, that China lied to the United States. They did things to maximize the body count. For example, they knew for a good 2.5 months before they told us that this virus was actually transferable from person to person. They denied and said that that was not the case for 2.5 months. Why did they do that? Because during that 2.5 months, they cornered the market on things like masks and other supplies for medical personnel. I'm not talking about the silly cloth masks that they told us to put on. I'm talking about the K95 masks that medical professionals were using when treating people. So this caused the deaths of, countless Americans. But AOC would never criticize them for it. She would never criticize China's brutal response to COVID domestically. She won't really criticize them on human rights issues. She won't challenge them on fentanyl. She professes to be concerned about violence in America. She wants to take away people's Second Amendment rights, but she will not call out China for smuggling these devices to our criminals that arms them effectively with machine guns. And that, to me, is indicative of an ideological commitment that is far more important to her than, quote unquote, hurting people or holding powerful people into account, because she will never do that for China.
Peter Schweizer, let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with this amazing work that you're doing and how they can, the preferred way to get a copy of the book.
You can get the book anywhere. We're debuting at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Costco, Target, Walmart. And you can keep up with our work at peterschweitzer.com. We also have a podcast called The Drill Down, and you can find out more information on that at thedrilldown.com.
Outstanding. Folks, check out The Drill Down. Check out peterschweitzer.com and make sure you get a couple of copies of this book. You don't want to miss it. I'll never forget bumping into you. I think we met at Sean Hannity's Christmas party, and you were just giving us all this story, all this background about this woman that was going to run for president named Kamala Harris, and at the time, right? I think it was 2018 or so. And Look at how that worked out, right? Peter Schweizer knows what's going on, folks. Peter Schweizer, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I thank you for being here, sir.
Great to be with you as always, Rich. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Good luck with the book. All right, folks, there is more to come straight ahead. Your calls and more coming up next.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to just reiterate a little bit of this because I think it's something, I mean, I talk about it a lot. I think it's important to talk about, but it's one of those things that I feel like it goes understated way too often. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the Red Scare in me, right? But I see it everywhere. I do. I see so much of that. I think about Yuri Bezmenov back in the days and his warning about ideological subversion in the United States when he defected from the Soviet Union. And this is what he did, right? He created propaganda for the Soviets. And he said this was, again, back in the 80s, he was making these warnings that we're seeing it here. It's here, and it's alive and well. And you do a little research on communism here in America, and you find out, man, they've been organizing for a long time inside labor unions, creating these positions. I'll never forget, and you could probably find it. I read it on either Marxist.org or Marxists.org, which I don't think are the same website, but they're similar. But it was an article that talked about something that they called the national majority or the national minority. And, well, they refer to both in the article. But the essence of this was an article written for one of the communist publications, I'm going to call it Communist Monthly, but it had a different name. And it was a long article, a very long article, full length. And it talked about how to recruit what they called at the time the national minority, which was African Americans. And they were saying that the Communist Party USA didn't have enough African Americans in their ranks, so they had to recruit them. And in effect, what they suggested was creating these pseudo-leadership positions to give them a feeling of importance, like a shop steward or something like that. And it was within labor unions. That was what they were particularly targeting. And they said, and you do this so that you can drive home the idea that conservative whites or, non-liberal whites are not on their side. And it was just fascinating because this article was written like before I was born or right around the time I was born. And here we are 45 years later, and it's a thing, right? It's being used in our government. It's called DEI, white guilt. It's crazy. Anyway, folks, I am Rich Valdez. We're going to continue our discussion straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to our Monday night program. If you want to join our late night town hall conversation nationwide, feel free, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And today there was some exciting stuff going on with the budget. Biden was off his rocker, proposed a budget. The House quickly says, no, thank you. and we're going to hear about it. They swiftly rejected the $7.3 million budget proposal. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Bidenomics as well. And something that I wanted to bring up for you guys is a clip of Joe Biden. Let me see where it is on my cut sheet. I have a whole bunch here. Here we go. Yeah, so this is Joe Biden. He's in New Hampshire earlier today, and he says, I'm a capitalist, man. Make all the money you want. Just pay your fair share. And, you know, the problem I have with this statement is that it's not really a fair share, right? It's not like everybody's paying the same amount, like a flat tax, fair tax type of deal. No, it's not the case at all. This is the more you make, the more they take, and not in a proportional sense. And I think that's very unfair. But I want you to listen to President Joe, who I like to call El Baboso, Joe El Baboso Biden. Listen to this.
Big corporations and the very wealthy began to pay their fair share. I'm not anti-corporation. I represent the state of Delaware. More corporations incorporated in Delaware than every other state in America combined. But guess what? But I'm a capitalist, man. Make all the money you want. Just begin to pay your fair share of taxes. You may remember the big fight I had not long ago, and the reason we were able to cut the deficit already by $7 billion in the first year. And that was because we found out that we wanted to make sure that there were 50 corporations that made $40 billion in 2021. Didn't pay a penny in taxes. I did an awful thing. I convinced us all to raise it to 15%. Isn't that awful? And it paid for everything that we've paid for what we've done so far and still cut the deficit. Look, a fair tax code is how we invest in things that make this country great. From healthcare, education, defense, and so much more, research, development.
Well, that's Joe El Baboso Biden rambling about how great it is to pay more taxes and how he wants to get deeper and deeper into your pockets. But I want to break down this clip of audio and, of course, the budget proposal that went on today with senior economist at FreedomWorks and former economist in the Trump administration. He's also a senior economist at the Heritage Foundation. Steve Moore, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Rich. So good to be with you. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure. So let's get your reaction to Biden saying he's a capitalist, man. Just pay your fair share.
Boy, where to start? Well, let me start with, I am, by the way, I was an advisor to the Trump campaign in 2016, and I'm also a senior, just for full disclosure, I'm also a senior economic advisor to this current Trump's campaign this year. And one of the things that I worked on in 2016 was we did the Trump tax cut that was wildly successful by any measure. We had incredible job growth. We brought a lot of factories and businesses back to the United States because prior to Trump's tax cut, the United States had the highest business tax rate in the world. And I remember talking to Trump about this in late 2015, and I showed him, these statistics about, our tax rate is way up high here, sir. And I said, all the rest of the countries are way down here. And he looked at it and instantly got it. He said, well, that's like a Head Start program for all the businesses located outside the United States. So we did lower the business tax rate to 21%. And all of a sudden, all these jobs kept and all the money started flowing back to the United States as we went from the highest tax country to one of the lowest tax countries. Now, if you don't think that is like a magnet, then somebody's got to explain. I wish Joe Biden were on the show, and I'd ask him, if you don't think taxes matter, why is it that everybody's leaving, Illinois and New York and California and New Jersey, the highest tax states in the country, and where are they going, Rich? They're going to, Tennessee and Texas and Florida and Utah, and states with either no income tax or low taxes. So businesses migrate to areas where the taxes are lower and where they're treated fairly. So under the Biden plan that he introduced, which is he calls fair, we're going to raise the business tax rate up to one. I was told that we will have now a higher tax rate than China, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Mexico, all the countries we come. How is that going to create jobs? I mean, Rich, it doesn't make any sense. So from an economic standpoint, this tax and spend budget that he put out, and by the way, I think you made a little mistake. I think if I heard you correctly, you called it the $7 billion budget. It's actually the $7.4 trillion.
Oh my goodness,
budget.
Forgive me.
Yeah, and so there's a lot. By the way, $1 trillion, folks, is seven followed by 12 zeros. So these
That's
numbers
crazy.
are so large, they're mind-numbingly complex. But we're now spending, as a nation, $55,000 for every household in America at the federal level. That's how much government is. It's $55,000 for every household in America.
That's an insane number, trillion with a T, and this is the fair share. And again, I think our conversations always come back to this because I'm just so skeptical that you can break the cash addiction that the folks in Washington have. But at some point, I guess they have to because there's just not enough cash to go around.
Well, good point. And incidentally, when I listen to Biden, get on his soapbox and make these speeches about how unfair the tax system is, who do you think was in Congress for 40 years and writing the tax code? Rich?
Right.
Oh yeah, Joe Biden's been there. He wrote these tax rules, and now he's complaining about them. And incidentally, you and I have known each other for a while. I'm a flat tax guy. I'd get rid of all these deductions and loopholes and carve-outs. I would just make the tax rate low and uniform for everybody, so everybody really would pay their fair share. We have a system right now that some companies pay a lot of tax and others pay almost no tax. And by the way, the industry that pays absolutely zero tax is the green energy industry, which is the one that Biden is showering with money.
And what's funny there, Steve Moore, is there was recently, a couple of months ago, he was touting these jobs that were created. And I don't know if they're no-show jobs or what, but they were all government jobs. And I'm thinking to myself, government jobs, nothing more than more tax dollars being spent. And if that's how he's going to grow the economy by adding government jobs, I don't think we really get too far, do we?
No, I mean, think about it like this, because I like to try to keep this as simple as possible. Let's say you were running a business, and let's say you were running, a medium-sized business, and let's say you were losing $2 million a year. Not making money, but you were losing $2 million a year. Would you go out and hire another slew of workers? I mean, so my point is, we've got a federal government that's losing $2 trillion a year. That is, it's the red ink is $2 trillion a year, and yet the government's on a hiring spree. That doesn't make any sense, Rich. The government should be shedding workers and shedding operations that aren't working. And you can't balance your budget if you keep expanding your costs. And so that's what's happening in Washington. And the two fastest areas of growth and employment, when Biden talks about, look at all these jobs we created, do you know what two industries have created the most jobs? You mentioned one of them, government. You know what the other one is?
No.
Healthcare.
Yeah, I was going to guess that.
Guess what? Guess who drives the healthcare system? Government does. Medicare and Medicaid and all the other government programs are half the health industry. So, isn't it interesting that those two industries are the ones that are hiring all the workers?
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's always going to be the case because I feel like healthcare has become, in many ways, really government controlled, even though we try to pretend it's not. Ever since the ACA, every doctor I know is selling their practice to a hospital. These hospitals are in cahoots with insurance companies, which are running the government, right? Because I think that's how it works. right? The insurance companies tell the government what to do. They create the law. They follow suit, and they make it happen.
Yep.
Insane.
And where do the health insurance companies get their money? From the government payments. And so it's just an incestuous relationship between government and the big health insurance companies. I want to see more jobs in manufacturing and in technology and in construction and, people who make things in America. But you've got a big problem because the government doesn't create any jobs, by the way. The only way that the government
or anything else
take money out of your or my pocket.
Yeah, 100%. Folks, we are on with Steve Moore. He's been an economist with Trump through and through, both in the administration and on the campaign, and he's been at this for a long time. He was in the Reagan administration as well. And Steve Moore is coming right back with us. When we come back, Steve Moore, I'd like you to give us a play-by-play on what this $7.3 trillion budget proposal really entailed. What was he thinking? Is this another ploy to blame it on obstructionist Republicans in the House? We'll see. Folks, don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez. We're coming right back with Steve Moore.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Tremendous amount of things you can cut. Let me be precise. Tremendous amount of things you can do, not cut. He said, but the bottom line is he's still at it.
Well, there you go. That is Joe El Baboso Biden. And he's talking about things that you could cut. You could cut this. I don't see him cutting anything. I see him adding and adding and adding. Now, Steve Moore, I want to get into your play-by-play on this $7.3 trillion budget. But I just want to say, at the State of the Union, Joe Biden was touting this 3% inflation, right? And again, that's on his count, but let's just say that is the case. Do you think it's something that he should be celebrating when he took office and inflation was, 1.25% or 1.5%, and now it's 100% increased from that, doubled? I don't think he should. What say you?
It's really simple, and I want to make sure that your listeners understand what happened. I think most people can connect these dots. Even though his president seems incapable of doing it. So when Biden came into office, right from the beginning, the first thing he did was spend $1.9 trillion on he said it was because of COVID, but COVID was basically over, and it was mainly just to spend on social programs and green energy programs and giveaway programs. These are programs that the left had wanted to create for many, many years, but finally they had the opportunity to do it because the economy was in flux as we came out of COVID. And so they spent $1.9 trillion, then they spent another trillion, then they spent another trillion. And so they just louted on, $4 trillion on top of the money we'd already spent on COVID, which was $6 trillion. By the way, I want to get this off my chest. I believe that one of the greatest mistakes, maybe the single greatest mistake in American history, was the locking down of our economy during COVID. That was a tragic error. Let's hope we never ever do that again. There were virtually no health benefits to those lockdowns. But in any case, getting back to the point at hand. So you had this massive spending, and how was that funded? Oh, well, I think everybody knows. We borrowed it. And how did the Federal Reserve Board accommodate that? Guess what, Rich? They printed money. They just turned up the printing presses, and they just dumped dollar bills and $100 bills into the economy. And what happens when you do that? This is seventh grade economics. Inflation is more money chasing fewer goods. And so it was as clear, as obvious as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west that you would have inflation. And that's what happened. So the inflation went up. Remember the summer of 2022 when the inflation rate hit 9.2%? That was like the highest level since Jimmy Carter. So that was a predictable result of this. Now, the good news is the prices, the increase in the inflation rate has come down. But we're still, let me give you an example. Grocery prices today, on average, are about 22% more expensive than they were when Trump was president. A mortgage payment is roughly 70% more expensive. Energy prices for gas and your utility bills are like 35% more expensive. So, Rich, why is he bragging about inflation when it's actually strangling families? It's causing incredible economic stress and financial stress for middle-class families. But people in Washington, including the guy in the White House, just don't get that.
Right. And I think it's the creative financing and the fudging of the numbers that we see time and again, where he raises the inflation, obviously, to the highest in 45 years and whatnot. And then because it's coming down from 14 and it's at 3, he thinks he's a hero.
Right.
But it's still double what it was when he took it in. I mean, 100% higher is a huge deal and nothing, I think, to be proud of. But he goes out there, kind of with no shame in his face. And he's just like, hey, I'm terrific.
And by the way, most people don't even believe when because I'll go to the store. People have seen me on Fox News or other shows, and people will come up to me and they'll say, why do you say that? And by the way, the inflation rate right now is not 3%; it's closer to about 3.5%, and we're going to get a number tomorrow, and I anticipate it's going to be back to about 4% inflation. But the point is that people come up to me and they get angry. They keep saying, boy, why do you keep saying inflation's only 3.5%? Because the things that you have to buy, Rich, you got to buy food, right? You got to buy your groceries. You got to pay your utility bill. You got to pay your mortgage. You got to pay for gasoline for your car. Those things are up a lot more than 3.5%. Those things are up, 5-6%. And then you have the problem. Did you see where Biden was talking about shrinkflation, where they're, putting fewer Doritos in the packages and, you get fewer Oreos? Well, that's just another sign of inflation under Biden. I don't understand why he's bashing the companies for that. It's just another way that companies are trying to meet their costs by putting fewer, Doritos in the bag. You get fewer chips. But that just means you're paying more folks to get less. How is that a success?
Obviously it's not. Steve Moore, let everybody know how they can keep in touch with you, how they can get that great newsletter and everything else you're working on.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. I hope you're getting the hotline. And we put out I started a group a few years ago with my friends Art Laffer and Steve Forbes, and at that time Larry Kudlow, and then he went off and Donald Trump stole them from us and made him his chief economist. But you can get our Committee to Unleash Prosperity hotline for free. There's no inflation in that cost. So people just need to go to committee to unleashprosperity.com. That's committee to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for the hotline. And I got a big compliment the other day from Newt Gingrich, the former speaker, said, it's the first thing I read every morning.
Yeah, it's definitely on my top 5 things in the morning as well. It's always really well done. Thank you. I appreciate it. Steve Moore, everybody. Get it at the committee to unleashprosperity.com. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, sir.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Talk to you soon.
You bet. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming back. We're going to talk about George Stephanopoulos and his war on women.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And over the weekend, there was some controversy with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos, former Clinton advisor, turned journalist, or journalist turned Clinton, communications person, and then went back into the world of reporting. He had an interesting exchange with Congresswoman Nancy Mace. And what I found interesting was, I guess you could look at this one of 2 ways, if I'm being fair. And I thought of it as like, man, it's kind of like you don't ask a woman if she's pregnant, right? I mean, if you see the roundest belly, you just don't say that. And I think he was doing that too. Now, granted, he was having her on to talk about this specific topic, but he asked and she answered. And I think he felt she was evading the question, and being evasive, he followed up with another one. But his follow-up, the third, maybe a fourth follow-up, and she said, I think it's insulting that you're asking that question. And I think he crossed the line, but I think others might look at him and think, you know what? That's a good journalist. That's how you do it. And I try to think of it as if it were, let's say, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, and he were interviewing E. Jean Carroll, and he were to have pushed back in the same way, how would we view it? I'm curious to know your thoughts. Listen to this exchange.
And you've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I've lived for 30 years with an incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. And it's a shame that you will never feel, George. And I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not gonna do that.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming
You've
me.
endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim, and I find it disgusting. And quite frankly, E. Jean Carroll's comments when she did get the judgment, joking about what she was going to buy, it makes it harder for women to come forward when they make a mockery out of rape, when they joke about it.
Doesn't it make it harder for women to come forward when they?
It makes it harder when other women
candidates?
joke about it, and she's joked about it. I find it offensive, and I also find it offensive that you're trying to shame me with this question.
I'm not trying to shame you
are.
at all. In fact,
I have dealt with this for 30 years. You know how hard it was to tell my story 5 years ago when they were doing a fetal heartbeat bill and there were no exceptions for rape, incest, or rape or incest in there? I had to tell my story because no other woman was coming forward. No rape victims were represented. And you're trying to shame me this morning.
I'm just asking.
And I find it offensive. And this is why women won't come forward.
Women won't come forward because they're defamed by those who perpetrate rape.
They are judged and they're shamed, and you're trying to shame me this morning. I think it's disgusting.
I'm not shaming you at all.
I told my story. It took me 25 years to tell my story. I was judged for it. I still get judged for it today.
I'm asking you a very simple question.
And I answered it. You're shaming me for my political choices.
So there we have it. That is the exchange between George Stephanopoulos and Nancy Mace. And I want to bring in somebody who knows all too well about the war on women that George Stephanopoulos is waging. She's the author of The War on Women, and you know her from radio and from television and from this program as well. Jennifer Kerns, welcome back.
Hey, Rich. Great to be with you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being with us. I know you're not in the New York time zone, so it's not so late for you, but thank you either way. Now, when you heard this, what did you think? I mean, you're an authority on this topic.
Well, instantly I pressed record, and I'm sharing that with all of my female GOP clients. This is the way that you answer the question, right? This is the way that you take on the mainstream media when they're trying to badger Republican women about how they feel about the issue of choice. George Stephanopoulos was questioning her voting choice. Well, gosh, I would bet you that George Stephanopoulos voted for Joe Biden last time, as did 95% of the newsrooms, according to Gallup poll. I bet you he's going to vote for Joe Biden again. And look at Joe Biden's own history. Joe Biden has been accused by Tara Reade of sexually assaulting her in the basement of the United States Capitol while on the job. And he basically reportedly got away with it. And not only did Tara Reade report that she was sexually assaulted by the now president of the United States, she actually went to the chief of staff of his office and summarily lost her job. So isn't that sort of the same thing that George Stephanopoulos is, sort of accusing Donald Trump of doing? Look, this is also an anchor, George Stephanopoulos, who worked for Bill Clinton, who ended up having to admit that he had sexual relations with that woman, that 19-year-old, by the way, the 19-year-old barely legal intern Monica Lewinsky, and you can also look at other alleged cases, Juanita Broderick's case, for example, the other lady's case, her name is escaping me. Oh, Kathleen Willey, excuse me. Her assertion that Bill Clinton actually sexually assaulted her in the hallway to the Oval Office. I mean, these are big allegations, and if true, they're extremely troubling. And yet, here is George Stephanopoulos attacking a GOP female congresswoman who is a survivor of rape, and he worked for Bill Clinton, the guy who's been accused of the same or worse. I mean, it's just a liberal hypocrisy in motion.
Yeah, and when he wrote his book back in the days, he talked about helping to clean up the bimbo problems for Bill Clinton, and I'm just wondering who and what entity is going to hold him to account, right? Because I would only imagine if some of these things were done or said by a conservative, TV journalist asking these same types of pushing back pointed questions, that there would be outrage. Jen Kerns.
There would be. And unfortunately, the answer is he probably won't lose his job at, ABC News on Sunday mornings. He probably won't lose his job as the quote unquote squeaky clean anchor of Good Morning America. I mean, that was a branding leap in of itself. If you remember the movie that came out about the 92 elections on the Clinton campaign, Primary Colors, it was the George Stephanopoulos character that was sleeping with his campaign aide coworker. So, the branding leaps that are made and allowed for Democrat consultants are far different than the ones that are made for GOP consultants. I can remember in 2014 when I first moved to the East Coast from being on the West Coast and in politics for many years, being told, oh, well, you can't be in the media because, nobody can make a jump from being a GOP strategist to, say, a talk radio host or a columnist or something like that. And I said, well, Karl Rove did. And the person said to me, yeah, that's one person out of how many, 10,000 people who work on the GOP side. But you see it all the time, right? Don't you, Rich? On the left, all of the campaign aides, they become host of MSNBC. Look at Jen Psaki. Right. She was the White House press secretary, and now she has a show on NBC News and MSNBC, and she anchors the primary debate coverage, and she anchored the Super Tuesday coverage. So it's okay for thee, but not for me. And by me, I mean all of my fellow GOP strategists or anyone, frankly, in the media who is center-right. And it's just a double standard that exists in this industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And it's disheartening, to say the least. Jen Kerns, stick with me. I want to come back. I want to get your reaction to the other part of what they were talking about, which was his improper characterization of that Trump was kind of found guilty of rape. That didn't happen. It was sexual abuse that the judge alluded to, and it was a civil thing. It wasn't a criminal thing, and I think he made it out to be worse than it was. Folks, stick with me. We are with Jennifer Kerns. You know her from All American Radio, and she's coming right back with me. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Jennifer Kerns. And, of course, your calls are coming up, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ, if you want to join us on Open Phone America. Now, Jennifer Kerns, George Stephanopoulos, it seemed like he was doing a smear job. I mean, it's one thing to say that you are a journalist and you're hard-hitting, but I think there's a degree of objectivity that has to go along with that. And when you assert that something's happening when it's not really the case, and you're trying to make things look worse than it is, I think you lose credibility if you're not doing it from the sense of like you do or I do, where you say, look, this is our opinion. I'm a conservative. This is my commentary, and that's the opinion I have. But he doesn't come across that way. He comes across as he's a sincere, objective, or at least he's trying to come across that way to, I think, the majority of Americans that watch his program. And I feel like he's not doing the right thing. What was your take on his characterization of what happened to Trump?
Well, I thought that was actually the most interesting part of the interview. I'm so glad you're touching on that. He says to Representative Nancy Mace, well, Trump was convicted of rape and then so on and so forth, and he begins to list this laundry list. Well, that actually wasn't true. And if it were a presidential debate or a town hall, you would have maybe a fact checker intervene or say, whoa, that's not true. But it was live TV, so no one could intervene and stop him. Nancy Mace, I think, did a great job. The fact is, George Stephanopoulos was dead wrong. Donald Trump never was convicted of rape in this case or any other case. In fact, he never even went to a criminal court. Even the E. Jean Carroll matter was a civil court case, and it was a civil complaint, and it was mostly about defamation because he had made some kind of snarky remarks about her. So that was wild. And here's the thing. Here's the one thing Donald Trump has really shown us all, and that is how to fight back. If I were Trump, and look, I know he's got a lot of lawsuits on his plate. I know he's got a lot of legal fees, but I also know he's raising a lot of money that can go towards legal fees. And I would not be surprised if we see Donald Trump sue ABC News over this and sue George Stephanopoulos for this. And sue, the Sunday morning program over this. You remember when he was in the White House, they actually sued a couple of magazines and newspapers over some erroneous reports about Melania, and they actually won. And this was around the time of the Covington Catholic kid story of conservatives kind of suing these, mainstream outlets to say, hey, you got to slow your roll. You've got to make sure you fact check. I would not be surprised if we see Donald Trump sue on this matter, because that was a flagrant red flag that George Stephanopoulos threw down, and very careless journalism.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Now, I want to get your take on moving forward. What happens here? Does this irrespective of a lawsuit from Trump or not, does the rest of the media, does Rachel Maddow call for George Stephanopoulos to not be carried live and interrupt his program the way she interrupts Trump? I feel like nothing will happen, right? And it's like, we can talk about it. We've made note of it, but move on, folks. It's just another Democrat telling a mistruth about a Republican.
Yeah, unfortunately, unless he makes several gaffes in a row, I think no one will bat an eyelash on this. And here's the thing, even on the best day, I will give some in the media the optimistic, benefit of the doubt. I think some of these reporters actually believe what they're saying. I don't think that George Stephanopoulos actually got up there and intended to say Trump was a rapist, even though he wasn't. I think half of them actually believe it. They believe this. They're drinking their own Kool-Aid. And that is equally as dangerous as intentionally telling mistruths, because as a journalist, you have to also have the integrity. You have to have the, the clarity to be able to sift through facts fast. The news cycle is the fastest it's ever been in American history. And you have to have the discernment as a journalist to say, oh, wait, no, he was not ever convicted of rape. This is mostly a defamation and slander case. And for George Stephanopoulos on that regard, he receives an F in my book, a failure as a journalist. He should be removed at a minimum from the Sunday morning show, because that is such a powerful show where you talk about the world leaders and the national leaders, and you have those newsmakers on from Capitol Hill. That is a very dangerous position for someone who truly believes Trump is a rapist, and that comes out of his mouth. That person needs to be removed.
Jennifer Kerns is the host of All American Radio, and she's also the author of The War on Women. Jen Kerns, stick with me when we come back. I'm going to get your hot take on Biden's State of the Union. There was just so much there, so we'll have a few minutes to cover that. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Joe! Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And of course, when that happened last Thursday, the president walked in and he started shaking hands with everybody, taking selfies, having full-on conversations with people, stopping to talk to Marjorie Taylor Greene to get a pin from her. It was really quite the spectacle. I'd never seen anybody walk to the front of the room the way Joe Biden did that day. It was kind of like I would do it. I would stop and talk to everybody and be like, you got to go down. Don't wait for me. Don't worry. Jen Kerns, let's get your hot takes on the State of the Union.
Well, look, I would call it the stakes of the union because the stakes were very high for Joe Biden. It was very high for him to prove that he has the mental fitness and fortitude to serve. It's very interesting. He walked into that with a couple of really negative polls at his back, including an ABC News poll that says 85% of Americans think he's too old to serve as president of the United States. That is significant. There was also a poll in January, Rich, of NBC News, again, another liberal poll, not conservative, that said 75% of Americans think he does not have the mental fitness to serve as president. So those are two very damning things, and coupled with his favorable versus unfavorable, in which he is completely upside down and underwater, he has only a 42% approval rating, which, remember, they made fun of Donald Trump for having a 42% approval rating. Now Joe Biden has it. And even worse, he has a 58% unfavorable rating. The only person who has that similar disapproval rating is Hillary Clinton. So that tells you the dismal state of the union that Joe Biden is in. Now, look, after watching him and watching, Gerald Nadler and all these people coming out saying, oh, see, we told you he's fit to serve. It makes me feel even more strongly that they are pumping this guy full of Prevagen. I'm having a psychologist on my show this week who's going to talk about signs that she sees that they may be pumping him full of Adderall. I, of course, am not a medical doctor, nor do I play one on the radio or TV. But, they did have high hopes for him. And I think this is a White House and these advisors that are surrounding him and the Democrat Party as well. They're so desperate to get this guy reelected. I think they would do anything to him in order to prove that case. And that's sad. And that's borderline elder abuse.
My sentiment exactly. I think this is the wrong thing to do at the wrong time in our history. Jennifer Kerns, let everybody know the website where they find you.
allamericanradio.com, or you can find me on social media at allamericanjen.
Thanks for being here, Jen. You are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. We appreciate it. Jennifer Kerns, everybody. And folks, straight ahead, Open Phone America. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. It's Monday night. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337. The phone lines are open. It's Open Phone America. And I want to remind you that we were talking about this George Stephanopoulos war on women, in particular, Congresswoman Nancy Mace. We also had some discussion about China's malign influence in many ways, you know, through the government, through big business, through investment in the LGBTQ movement, as well as through TikTok and social media. And there's plenty going on in that world. And we also had some discussion on some other items that are slipping my mind at the moment. But what I want to, the economy, Steve Moore, yeah, that was a big deal. The $7.3 trillion budget proposal that was put forth today. So your thoughts and comments on that are welcome. But I also wanted to circle back a little bit to something that Joe Biden said about 35 years ago. And Biden, interestingly, is, you know, I saw a debate. Let me just preface this. Over the weekend, I saw an older clip, some file footage of Biden debating Bernie Sanders in the 2020 primaries. And Bernie Sanders says, obviously, Joe, you've been in the Senate for a long time, and you've been calling for cuts to veterans, for veteran services and Medicaid and Medicare. And he says, I never called for cuts on that. And he says, no, but you did. And he says, well, let me rephrase it. I know that you've called for these cuts because I've seen you do it, as your colleague in the Senate. He says, I never did it. And he says there was a number of things that were up to be cut. And we were talking about cutting all of them. And Bernie says, well, there you go. You're admitting it. And what I find interesting is, if I had to pick somebody in that fight, I'd pick Joe Biden because he made the most sense. He was saying, look, if we got to cut something, we cut something. And Bernie Sanders was the one trying to, take the all-out commie approach. And it's interesting to see how Joe Biden over the years, really the last few, has really changed his tune on so many things. And I think it was that Bernie Sanders pressure from everything that Bernie represents that really made him change his positions on everything. Listen to Joe Biden's his response to a State of the Union address given by President George Herbert Walker Bush, Bush 41, 35 years ago. Check this out.
Joe Biden, I would settle for a world in which I could worry about the same kinds of things that my parents worried about, in which I only had to worry about the grades my children got in school rather than the drugs they're being exposed to, in which I only had to worry about the prices my wife had to pay at the supermarket instead of fearing that she might get mugged by a junkie in the parking lot as she loads her groceries into the car, in which tonight I could call my mom just to wish her pleasant dreams, not for the purpose of making sure she's safe in her own home. That's the kind of world I want. That's the kind of world you deserve. In a nutshell, the president's plan doesn't include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, not enough prosecutors to convict them, not enough judges to sentence them, and not enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. We disagree with the president's decision to cut back on our previous commitment to protect against drugs coming across the border, to cut the Customs Service, the Coast Guard, and the Border Patrol. We think we should do more to stem the flow of drugs across our borders, and we think we should go one step further. Let's go after the drug lords where they live, with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it. And we don't have to promise a world without worry or fear. We're not asking for that much. all we have to do together is to keep our promises and stay together. Thank you.
Look at that. Now, let me tell you, did Joe Biden sound like a Republican back then? No, it's just that back then there was a lot of similarity, a lot of, I should say, commonality, right? Areas of agreement like public safety and the border, national security. That you could debate about how much we would spend, but not that we were going to spend on national security, putting America first, protecting the country, making sure your mom doesn't get mugged on her way home or your wife, right? Things that Joe Biden was saying. And honestly, I got to say, he sounded somewhat sincere. Unlike now when these platitudes that he puts out there that don't sound sincere. Oh, come on, yeah. Like when he gets, I think, again, a moment of sincerity on the evening of the State of the Union when he says, Lincoln Riley, she was innocent girl murdered by an illegal. That's how he feels. He feels that these aliens are illegal. But he's going along to get along because that's what's called for in his current position. And it's a shame to see how far this man has fallen. It's a shame to see how far the Democrat Party's come. I think if you took, Barry Goldwater, who predates me by a bunch, and you put him next to, Trump or any number of prominent conservatives today, I think that their ideologies, their rhetoric would sound similar. But if you take a Democrat from that era, they're not the same, right? Not even like Walter Mondale, Dukakis, Bill Clinton even, right? They don't match up with a Joe Biden of today. How about, I'll do you one more. How about Barack Obama and Joe Biden? They don't even match up, right? Barack Obama is known as the deporter-in-chief for all of the deportations that he did. And he was friendly to the Dreamers and tried to make sure if little kids were born here or brought across, I should say, early, like under 2 or something like that, or under 5, I forget what the criteria is. But point is, he took action, right? There's footage out there of him, and again, not necessarily saying it to score political points, but because he knew he had to. He knew he had a job to do to defend this country's borders, something that Joe Biden and the media have massaged to the point where it's almost as if it's not part of the job. And that I find amazing. It's like one of the biggest con jobs we've ever seen, ever. So I want to get your thoughts on that and on the old Joe Biden versus the new Joe Biden, plus your calls as well. Again, that number, 833-482-5337. The phone lines are open, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Did you know that this was going to come up? How did this get booked? This was what, Thursday, Friday? They said you want to be on this week?
This was coming into the weekend. We were going to do ABC News this week with George Stephanopoulos, and it was supposed to be about 2024. So I was all ready to talk about Donald Trump versus Joe Biden in the 2024 race for the general election. The president had just given his State of the Union. All of that, I would imagine, would come into a conversation about 2024. But the guy literally led with me being raped.
That is Congresswoman Nancy Mace describing how she was duped. She was tricked going to ABC News. Now, listen, I'll say this. Look, she's a member of the United States Congress, and I respect everything that she's been through. But I'm going to say this: if you've publicly declared that stuff, and you're going on a major network, even a small network, if I do an interview at a college newspaper, I'm totally aware that it's in the purview of their job to ask questions that I may not be expecting. And it's part of my job to expect all of those questions and be prepared for them. And I think she was. I think she was caught a little off guard because she probably expected more from Stephanopoulos, which might have been, I would say, a mistake on her behalf. But you've got to imagine that they're going to try and come at you sideways. They don't really have an interest in you, right? I know that if they invite me on MSNBC, CNN, all these networks that never invite me on, if they do one day, I'm totally prepared for what's going to go down. I know how it's going to go down. If Rachel Maddow wants to have me on the show, they're going to try and embarrass me. They're going to try and ask me a question I don't know the answer to. Like what's the square root of whatever. They're going to do anything they can to make you look as stupid as you can. And this is I learned this in corporate America. When you have enemies I'm going to call them political enemies in a board meeting. Why not say the agenda says X, Y, and Z? I'm pretty sure somebody's going to come at me sideways and ask about something else so that I could say, I don't have those numbers with me, but I can get them to you later. And then go, well, why wouldn't you have those? Shouldn't you be prepared? Isn't that your whole job? Right? And people will try and come at you sideways. And you never know who's setting that up. Might not even be those people. Might be someone else that's trying to test you somehow. Anyway, point is, I think Nancy Mace should have been prepared for a bamboozle, a switcheroo from George Stephanopoulos. But that's exactly what she said. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that they're doing that. And listen, people always ask me when I invite them on this show, whenever the more questions they ask about what are we going to talk about, the vaguer I get. Because the more vague I can be, the better. I may find something in their background in between, 10 in the morning when we try to book them and 10 o'clock at night when we're talking to them. And I may want to ask that question. I try not to be too combative or difficult because you don't want them to hang up. You don't want them to leave the interview and rip the mic off like I've seen so many times on TV. And it's happened to me even on this show. I've had some people that were offended by my questions and commentary. It comes with the territory. But my point is, there's a balance, right? There's a balance, and you got to be ready for that stuff. So Nancy Mace, we'll get a little bit more on her. But I want to get to your calls. Let's go to Otis, calling from Morgantown, Kentucky, WKCT. Otis, what's your thought about George Stephanopoulos?
Good evening, Rich. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate what you're doing, Rich. I gave up on ABC and NBC and CBS years ago. Thank you for doing that, though, Played. I heard it earlier today. Listen, that man, he set her up. It was a hit job right from the get-go. He should be fired. They should name the show, though, this week with George Stable Droppings.
Stable Droppings. Oh, that's tough. That is a tough one. Very original, Otis, and definitely tough. And, and I think he's slinging a lot of that around. And he's going to, it's funny how they like to say that it's the Republicans with the war on women, but clearly it's the Democrats. It's I can't imagine a conservative reporter doing this, right? Whether it was Bill O'Reilly, Tucker Carlson, any one of a bunch of just, conservative journalists that are out there. I can't imagine one of them asking that kind of question. Not even me. That I'm not a journalist. I am here to do my opinion stuff. But I don't think I would push back that hard on somebody that in a sensitive area like that, because it's going to be used against you. You know that they're going to paint you as some sort of insensitive monster, and when you do that, I think now, does Stephanopoulos get a pass? It seems like so far he might be, but this is, we're only a day in. Let's see what happens when more and more people hear it and see it, because I'm pretty sure while they may enjoy some good Sunday morning ratings, I don't know that everybody and their mama is watching ABC this week. Maybe I'm wrong. I tend to live pie in the sky kind of life. But I just don't think everybody's listening, Otis. But thank you for the funny name. I appreciate that. And big shout out to everybody listening in Kentucky on WKCT. Let us continue. Let's go to Jorge. Jorge's calling from Brooklyn, New York, listening on WFAS. Jorge, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you for putting me on, Rich. I wanted to take no less than the idea that the host of your caliber would definitely know the square root of 4 is a 2. But I didn't want to sidetrack. I didn't want to sidetrack that way. But I wanted to bring up the idea that in response to the president, that would be Bush. Would that be Bush? No.
I'm not. You're cutting in and out a little bit. Or if you're on speaker, pick up the phone because I'm getting a little echo and it's hard to hear you.
Oh, I was saying that President Bush, the father of President Bush.
Yeah, Bush 41.
The Senator Joe Biden being senator at that time in response to the State of the Union that he presented, that is the president, that he was outlining the idea that President Bush wanted to decrease spending in vital sectors that pertain to the security of the nation. And I would think that would be more important in the dialogue that the Republican president-elect at that time and serving now as president was advocating those kind of decreases in spending that would establish the security that was necessary at that time. And in fact, it's even more necessary now.
Yeah, listen, I agree that the security is necessary now. And well, it's interesting to me how Biden proposes these larger and larger budgets. Back then, he was calling for more and more, right? Same thing. He wanted more, but he was calling for them in the right areas. I think you needed military spending. He said we got to hit these narco terrorists where they are, the drug dealers. And, back then, thinking of Manuel Noriega and them. Yes, I agree. We should be doing that here, too. I mean, it's amazing how, the problems persist. Now, look, I don't live in a bubble. I realize that problems will always persist. We're always going to have murder in our lives. The question is, do we have a high murder rate or a very low one? And I would hope that we can get to a point where we have a couple of years where there's no homicides. But I understand how life works. And I realize that, with great freedom that we have comes great responsibility. And it's in many ways a double-edged sword. And we have a particular type of culture where people speak their minds. And we tend to be very focused on certain things in our country. And every group is kind of different and in what they focus on. And I say all of that because I know some people are going to say, but what about Japan? Or they're not criminals. And the biggest thing they do is kill themselves. And true, it's a very clean place. And they do kill themselves in record number. I get it. I hear these comparisons all the time. But ultimately, I think the United States is unique, and we need more of that Joe Biden from back in the days that wanted to protect his family, his wife, and every other woman that was walking alone at night, or whatever analogy he made, because that's where we are today, where we have crime and we don't have the prosecutors or the police, but it's not because we don't have enough of them. It's because we have the wrong ones in place, and that is a shame. All right. Jorge, thank you for your call. Big shout out to Brooklyn, New York, WFAS, our New York affiliate, the flagship. Anyway, coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you've worked so hard in the industry, and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And, it's so interesting the things that happen, right? There's this Boeing whistleblower. Apparently, we talked about this with an aviation executive when the nuts and bolts were falling off the doors and, people almost got sucked out of the plane. Well, the guy who blew the whistle on that and other stuff, he was found dead. They're saying it's an apparent suicide. I tell you, it's a crazy world. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. 50 people injured on a Boeing plane unexpectedly dropping in mid-flight due to a technical problem. Listen, technical problems happen all the time. I get it, but geez. I guess if you don't have that seatbelt on and that plane takes a 20-foot dip, your head's hitting the ceiling. You might get some whiplash, and we'll talk about that as well. And this is a good one. Study finds that teens feel peaceful and happy when they don't have, guess what? A smartphone. We'll talk about that one as well. But I want to get back to your calls. Let us go here to Sarah. She is in Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Sarah, go right ahead.
Hey, fantastic show as always. I really enjoy being able to listen to it at night.
Thank
I wanted to relate it. Well, I wanted to relate an experience. My mom lives in California, and she went to go vote in the primaries. And when she got to the table, they asked her, do you want a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot? And she took exception, and she said, why are you asking me in front of everybody which primary I'm going to vote in? She said, that should be private. And we said, well, that's the rule that we're doing now. And I think your call screener said they do the same thing in Virginia. But my mom said, you shouldn't, everybody gets to know in line and as a Republican, you're kind of a minority in California. And so she said, the whole purpose of a private ballot is so you can vote with your conscience and not be susceptible to peer pressure. And they're like, well, that's just the way we're doing it now. And she said, really? And she said, when I leave, what are you going to do with my ballot and all the other Republican ballots? Throw them in the trash?
Well, the only time I know that they do that is when you vote in a primary. I think there's no other way. Primaries in most states are closed. Some states like Vermont or whatever have the open primary where if you're a Democrat, you could vote in a Republican primary, which is kind of crazy because it's a political party function. But if I go to vote in a Republican primary where I vote, they ask you, Republican or Democrat, because that's the only two parties having a primary. And they direct you to the machine for your, that's counting Republican ballots versus Democrat ballots, because each party has a representative that, oversees like poll watching and whatnot. Now, I'm with you that you could make even that a secret ballot and just come in. The problem, I think, is they have to turn away independents, Green Party, anybody else who's not registered to vote. But again, I don't think you have to declare, right? I guess it could be as simple as saying, hi, I'm here to vote. What's your name? John Smith. Okay, John, I see that you're in the book. Go ahead and vote. And as long as you're in the book, registered as a Democrat or a Republican, then you're eligible to vote in the primary. So I see how we could make it easier. I don't know the caveat to that, but it's a good point. And you're right. I think, it would be better if people could just walk in and be like, hey, Jack, hey, how you doing? Jill, great. How's the kids? Oh, very good. How's your husband? Super. All right, I'm going to go vote. I voted, bloop, bloop, and that's it. I'm out of here. And, never have to have a conversation about what your affiliation is, because you're right. That could cause intimidation and other things. So I think that's a good point, Sarah. Now, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on this Stephanopoulos interview with the way he treated Nancy Mace?
Well, I'm ashamed to say this. My only excuse is I don't have a TV. And anyway, I was away from the computer this weekend, so I totally missed it. Can you fill me in real quick?
Yeah. Oh, yes, sure. Well, we played the little clip of it earlier, but George Stephanopoulos invited Nancy Mace for an interview. And on this interview, she shows up thinking she's talking about 2024. She had publicly announced that she was raped earlier in life, and he decided to lead with this instead of leading with the election questions. And I guess she wasn't expecting him to ask those questions, so he started asking her questions about what she thinks about her recent endorsement of Donald Trump, who was recently convicted of rape in a court in New York. Mind you, this wasn't a conviction of rape. This was the judge said that there was that he was liable for sexual abuse in the way he spoke to her, and caused that big E. Jean Carroll fine. But there was no conviction, and it wasn't a criminal matter for there to be a conviction. And she held her own, I think, but she was really taken aback by it, and several times told him she wasn't comfortable with that question, and that she felt he was trying to shame her for being a victim of sexual assault. And he reiterated 3 or 4 times, "No, I'm not trying to shame you. I want to know, as somebody who was raped, how do you feel about him being, how do you endorse?" In effect, he was asking without asking, how do you endorse a rapist if you yourself have been raped? Trying to put her on the spot. And, it seemed to me in very poor taste. But I tried to think in my head, imagine if this were Tucker Carlson and he was interviewing one of the people that accused Trump of rape, and like Eugene Carroll or something like that, and trying to push and get a more in-depth answer. I don't think Carlson would do that. I think, and if he did, I don't think after she said, "I think you're trying to shame me, I'm insulted and I'm uncomfortable with this," that he would keep going. But that's exactly what Stephanopoulos did with 3, 4 questions that he asked time and time again. So she's been making the rounds on TV all night tonight on different programs. Matter of fact, I have a clip of her saying she'll never go back to ABC News. Listen to this.
Is it time to say you're not going to do the Sunday shows anymore?
I actually paused doing Sunday shows for a long time now. This was my first time really back on a Sunday show in a while. I mean, I hit pause for a period of time, and I won't be going back on ABC anytime soon. I told them as I was walking out, good effing luck getting me back on.
Oh, there you go. And she was not happy about that. So, Sarah, that's the story. What's your initial reaction to that?
Well, thanks for filling me in. And yeah, I think they were trying to shame her. They were trying to make an example, almost like she was some kind of traitor as a rape victim. And if a conservative journalist had done that to a liberal, bringing up a past victimization, believe me, the left would be all over this and say what it was. Oh, they're shaming her. But it's evidently okay to do it to your political opponent, and that's pretty low. That's pretty disrespectful and low. And if the roles were reversed with it being a conservative journalist questioning someone who was liberal and bringing up their past being a rape victim, believe me, the left, they'd all be crying foul about that. So it just shows you the hypocrisy of the left.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Sarah, like always, thank you for your call. I appreciate you listening and being tuned in always. A big shout out to you and everybody in your neck of the woods, Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Folks, we come back to the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, we are back, and we're going to continue with your calls momentarily. But I want to share this study with you. Listen to this. Again, if you want to join us, I'm about to get to the calls. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. The study here says a majority of teens feel happy and peaceful without smartphones. That's according to a new survey that is showing that there are growing concerns about social media use and the impacts it has on a teenager's mental health. I think it's not just teenagers. I think everybody's getting screwed up on these things. A new Pew Research Center survey found that 74% of teens feel happy when they don't have their smartphones. The survey found that 72% of teens feel peaceful when they don't have these devices. Some teens reported feeling anxious, upset, lonely, and other emotions when they didn't have their smartphone, but the majority felt good. This Pew Research Center survey was published today, found 74% of teens feel happy when they don't have their smartphones with them on hand. The survey included 1,453 people. And again, 72% of them said they feel peaceful when they don't have these cell phones. 74% say they feel happy. Most teens between the ages of 13 and 17, 95% of those surveyed, have or at least have access to a smartphone, and most of them use the internet every single day. A smaller but still significant portion of teens reported negative feelings when separated from their smartphone. I can relate to that. I look at the news incessantly. But very, very interesting. Here, you got 7% of them say they feel upset often, and sometimes 33%. So 40% are often or sometimes upset. Anxious, 44%. 10% say they're always anxious if they don't have their phone, and 34% they are sometimes anxious when they don't have their phone. Lonely, here's an interesting one. 8% say they always feel lonely when they don't have their phone, and 31% say that they're sometimes lonely when they don't have their phone. So is that it? Is that the answer here? If you're lonely, forget a dog, forget a pet, forget making friends, going to bingo, joining the Y, anything like that. Nope. Don't go on a date with a pretty lady or a good-looking dude. No. What you're going to do is you're going to pick up your smartphone. Now, I'm sure many of us, for boredom, return to our phones, but I don't know if that's the case or if it should be the case. Anyway, let's go to Houston, Texas, and check in with Daniel. He's on KYST, Patriot Talk 920. Daniel, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich.
But before you start, let me ask you a question. Are you lonely when you don't have your smartphone?
Not at all.
Okay.
I use my smartphone for phone calls and to look up pricing whenever I'm out and about, and that's it. But
Makes
I do
sense.
use my computer at home and do a lot of research.
Yeah, we all do, right? Everybody's hooked on it one way or another.
Yeah.
What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I'm one of those ancient people, though, that I know what a bulletin board system is, which was the initial internet. Email used to be echo mail, not electronic mail. It echoed from one server to the next server to the next server. Back in the 80s, I actually sent an email to Australia to a guy I got his email address from, and about 3 weeks later, he replied to me and said, yeah, it eventually got here.
That's crazy.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I've kind of been in this business for a while. But, no, I was calling about George Stephanopoulos, and I feel like, yes, I mean, he was totally wrong in doing this to her, but it's the demon rats, their talking points that they're trying to throw out. They're trying to throw out as much as possible. President Trump is a rapist. He was a convicted rapist. I've been arguing with people online about that. I said, no, he has never been convicted of that kind of a crime. The whole Carroll thing, that they had to change the laws because the statute of limitations had run out. They specifically changed the laws to go after Trump, and then turned around and said, well, we're not going after anybody else with the same statute of limitations or the same thing. Plus, on top of that, she went into court with nothing but her hearsay on her part, her own hearsay, claiming this is what happened, but yet there is no true witnesses or video or anything else. It was just her word of mouth that completely let that go through. And I have a feeling that if it ever gets to SCOTUS, that it's going to just be thrown out before they, I think they're going to do a ruling on it, but it will be a ruling, hopefully, again, 9-0, that it gets thrown out and says.
Are you talking about the E. Jean Carroll verdict?
Yes, sir, the Carroll Carolyn.
Yeah, I think there is an appeal going on there. So you're right. It may make its way somewhere. Who knows? But I think you're on to something here. The way they put these things together, the way they're so heavy-handed with these things, like, we know you didn't rape her, and this is about rape, but we think you harassed her sexually or whatever. You sexually abused her verbally by saying bad things about her, and you defamed her character as a victim. So we're going to fine you whatever millions of dollars. I mean, that one was probably more in line with other cases that may have existed where somebody gets some damages, unlike the Letitia James, where it was, hundreds of millions of dollars and we're going to steal your buildings from you. Absolute insanity, the things that are going on. Daniel, I got to run and take my commercial, coming right back with your calls and more. Big shout out to Houston, Patriot Talk 920 KYST, and don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And I'm looking at an article here that is showing that there is a return of the bubonic plague, right? Remember that one? I don't, but I read about it. Bubonic plague, this is not good, right? This rodent-borne disease. Speaking of disease, today is the, third anniversary of the COVID lockdowns, fourth anniversary of the COVID lockdowns. It was called 15 Days to Flatten the Curve. Remember that? Stay home, and you'll protect your grandmother's, everybody else's grandmother. Just crazy the way they did things. Unbelievable. Anyway, China must be very, very happy. Speaking of China, let's go to Paul. He's in Boise, Idaho, and he wants to talk about China. Paul, go right ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Rich. Yeah, I know, short time here for me. Yeah, the first time I heard Peter Schweizer, it was during the pandemic, the beginnings of it, and he was talking about the fact that Trump had said something in a negative light, like calling it the China virus, I believe, is what set President Xi off. I mean, he did not like that at all. And he said, if you continue to call it that, I have control of your medications, all of America. And if you don't knock it off, I may just keep them from you. And I was shocked by hearing that the president of China actually saying that. And I remember hearing it. And it did kind of throw me for a loop, but he's been very, very effective as a reporter. And he's also caught Hunter Biden going into...
I missed the name. Who are you talking about?
Hunter Biden, Schweizer.
He's the reporter? Oh, Peter Schweizer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Peter Schweizer. Yeah, his research is impeccable.
Yes, and he found out that Hunter Biden had visited the equivalent of the Chinese CIA 4 different occasions. He went into that building. And he
the top spy was one of his investors on one of the deals. And then he's on tape saying, I can't find China's top spy. The guy's missing. What's going on? He's leaving them voicemails. Yeah, it was crazy. Paul, the music means we've got to go. Thank you for your call and for your faithful listenership. I appreciate you, my brother. Godspeed to you. America, we're back at it tomorrow. Lovely time with you this evening. Had a great time coming back off the weekend. I love the Monday show. And hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless. I'm Rich Valdez.